Welcome everybody. In this video we will talk about factoring perfect square trinomials. To start out with, a perfect square is the result you get after you square something. So for example, if we square 4 times 4 gives you 16, 16 is a perfect square. And a trinomial is a polynomial with 3 terms. Here we're asked to factor this trinomial. It has 1, 2, 3 terms. And the first thing we want to do is be able to recognize if it is a perfect square trinomial. Because if you're able to recognize something as a perfect square trinomial, you can factor it very, very quickly. So let's go through the steps to see if this is a perfect square trinomial. First thing you want to see is the first and the last term if they are perfect squares. And if we look at 9n squared, can we take the square root of it? And we can. It's 3n. How about the last term? Same thing. If we take the square root of it, yeah, indeed, it is a perfect square. It's 3. So that checks out. The first term and the last term are perfect squares. Next thing we need to look to see if the middle term equals 2 times the square roots of the first and last term. Or in other words, when we multiply the square root of the first term times the square root of the second term, is it double that? Or is it 2 times that? Well, 3n times 3 gives you 9n, and if we double that, gives us 18n. So yeah, indeed this is a perfect square trinomial. It checks out. The first term and the last term are perfect squares, and the middle term is the result of multiplying the square root of the first times the square root of the second and then doubling it. So if we're able to recognize that very quickly, we can factor this quickly. We'll set up our binomial, and it is going to be squared, and the first term is going to be the square root of the first term, and the back end of it is going to be the square root of the last term. But how do we determine if this is plus or minus? Well, we get that from our middle term. This is a negative 18n, which means we're going to add up to a negative 18, so our binomial is negative. So now we have a perfect square binomial. And if we wrote this out as 3n minus 3 times 3n minus 3 and multiplied this back out, we would get back to our original perfect square trinomial.